Hi guys, this is Fernando doing another video for more survivalists, in this case continuing with the topic of air. In one of my previous videos, it's called Preparedness, Don't Take Air for Granted. I did the exercise of going through, at least in my personal circumstances, seeing when air was compromised in one way or another. And I think it was quite good because you get to see the many cases in which you don't have a good supply of fresh breathable air, or it's at least compromised to some degree. And I think that if each of us does that exercise, you will see many cases in which you were either affected directly or it was a pretty close call, or it happened pretty close to you. So it kind of brings that point home, understanding that it is pretty important. If you don't have a supply of air, and it's so many things that could possibly go wrong that compromises air. It could be a fire, ashes, it could be volcano ashes, like I explained in my previous video. It could be, an attack, a terrorist attack or earthquake, something that it causes structures to collapse, and there's a significant dust cloud in the air. People, you see them coughing, as we saw in the 9/11 videos. You saw people just rubbing their eyes because dust got in there, and washing their faces with water. It is important enough that you should do something about it. So let's suppose you are someone that's rational, understanding all this stuff about preparedness, and saying, okay, I get the point, I understand the possibility of that happen, and what should I do? What is a rational, logical way to go about this? Well, something like this, like the respirator that I showed in that previous video, something like this is a good idea. In my opinion, it's compact enough that could be in your ADC bag, in a purse if you're a lady and you want to have preparedness related stuff in there. It does make sense. Really doesn't take that much space, and it could be very valuable. It could be very valuable in some of those scenarios. All right. Now, it gets a bit confusing when you start seeing all the different ratings. Talk about it, N95, N99. What does all that mean? What is it that I need? Well, let's go through that and see if we can make a bit more sense out of all that. We start with the United States standards right here at the top with the not oil resistant filters. We have N95. All this is not oil resistant. N95 filters 95% of airborne particles. N99 filters at least 99% of airborne particles. N100 filters at least 99.97% of airborne particles. Right? This is all, again, not oil resistant. Right? Now, if we go towards oil resistant, we are now talking about R95, 95%, R99, 99%, and R100, 99.97%. The oil-proof ones, the oil-proof filters would be P99, P95, P99, and P100. Right? So you sometimes hear, if you've already been involved a bit more of the survival and preparedness community, you see about people talking about N95 filters, N99. Well, yeah, those would be these ones. Now, the best protection possible would be here, right, for oil-proof filters as well. That would be offering all the good stuff, because you get the oil-proof protection and you get the filtration of all those particles. For a P100, that would be pretty close to ideal. Now, if we look at the European standards, in this case, we have P1, P2, and P3. These, for P1, filters at least 80% of airborne particles. P2 filters 94% of airborne particles. And P3 would be offering the best protection and 99.95% of airborne particles. Right, another European standard for the filtering half masks, which are these ones that I was showing you guys before. We have FFP1 filters 80% of airborne particles, FFP2 filters 94% of airborne particles, and FFP3 filters at least 99% of airborne particles. So basically, FFP3 would be what you want, all right, in this category of respirators. And here we have the package, and let me show that for a second. You have yellow for FFP1, have blue for FFP2, and you have red for FFP3. If we look here, we see that, yep, these are yellow. These aren't offering that much protection. It's of course much better than nothing, but ideally you would have something like this, these 3M respirators with red straps instead of the yellow ones. Right? Red straps offer FFP3. That's pretty much as good as it gets in terms of a collapsible respirator. Now, you may be asking yourself, is a face mask enough? You know, the face masks, those pieces of cloth that you see the doctors use and such. Well, basically, the skinny on this is that those are for protecting the patient, actually, from the little spit particles from the doctor. Right? It's not offering almost anything in terms of protection for that person. For the doctor, he's not using that for his own protection. Because those, yeah, it's just a little bit of tissue paper or cloth, and it's really not filtering much of what he's breathing in. Anything serious, it's not going to be stopped by that. Alright, it's offering quite poor protection, actually. Better than nothing, I suppose so, yeah, I guess. But not nearly as good as something like this. A proper respirator is going to be offering quite a bit more protection. Right, this is the one that I recommend for having in your EDC bag, in your purse, whatever. This is, again, it's compact enough. You have this valve, which makes it easier for breathing in, and it avoids the moisturing of the entire respirator quite a bit. You think about it, if you're in a disaster of some kind, of some nature, you're going to be running, moving around quite a bit, doing quite a bit of physical activity, and you get tired fast. If you don't have this valve, I've used the ones that don't have a valve, and it does get hard to breathe pretty fast. And yeah, it makes all the difference to have this. Within the limitations, guys. Within the limitations. The collapsible respirators, such as these ones, I find them to have pretty good fitting on most people's faces because it's quite adaptable. Especially because of this piece that you have here. It has like aluminum on the inside, so it bends nicely. You bend it to your face, your nose. It adapts quite well. It's pretty good. This is not NBC stuff, guys, okay? Not nuclear, biological, chemical stuff. This is basically for filtering those particles in the air. Talking about volcano ash, talking about debris from a terrorist attack, maybe from a natural disaster, an earthquake, something like that. And you just want to breathe in air without getting all that dust in you. Now, it does offer some degree of protection if you're talking about flu, all right? If we're talking about flu, what contaminates, what causes the disease to spread is those little spit particles in the air that you breathe in. All right, the flu gets spread from one person to another because of that. Someone coughs or someone talks, and those little particles hang in the air. You're nearby, you just breathe them in without even realizing. You can avoid that to some extent with this. Right, some experts say that it's mostly because of this, just avoid touching your face. And well, if it's just a matter of not touching your face, then just a simple face mask, such as the ones that you see used by doctors, that would avoid you touching your face to some point. Now, this is indeed going to offer some more real protection because as you wear this, you just feel it sucking in as you breathe in. Alright, so you are getting a bit more protection. For something more serious, for more serious threats, nuclear, biological, and chemical threats, you need a proper respirator. Something like this S10 Respirator, used by the British Army, slowly being replaced by the GSR General Service Respirator. The S10 is still pretty good, and I'm going to be doing a proper review of it, but this is the kind of thing that you need for a complete protection. Alright, for a nuclear, biological, and chemical environment protection, you know, with a proper canister filtering and complete sealing on your face. Okay, again, a separate video because we have to talk about other things as well, but this is what you would be needing in that case. now you cannot have this in your purse all day, you cannot have in your EDC bag all day. It's not really practical. And again, if we think about it, there are so many cases in which you're covering quite a bit of those possibilities, the debris, the dust in the air, all that sort of stuff. You are covering it quite well within reason with something like this. All right. So basically that's it. The best possible protection would be by a respirator that is in our system entirely. We're talking about a self-contained breathing apparatus. It's an SCBA. That's the kind of thing that you see firemen use, that they have like a mask like this one, but also with a hose that goes to an air tank in their back. That's because in some cases it's not a problem of particles or dust or something in the air. The problem is that there's not air there whatsoever. That happens in some of the fires. The fire consumes all the oxygen in the atmosphere, so all the oxygen in that region. So even if you have the best possible mask, you still don't have air. So you're basically, you asphyxiate nonetheless because there's no air. You're filtering, but you're not breathing anything. Alright, in that case you need a self-contained system, an SCBA, that provides oxygen for you itself. Right now, that's quite cumbersome, gets quite expensive as well, and chances of you needing that aren't that huge. You have to make up your mind. Do you need something like that? Maybe not, maybe yes. That's entirely up to you. The thing is that something always is better than nothing at all. Having this collapsible face mask, I find it to be very nice in the amount of possible scenarios that it ends up covering. If you have something like this in your home, then you're covering even more stuff. Do you need a self-contained breathing apparatus? Maybe not. But basically that's it. This is basically an approach to the topic, and trying to make a bit more sense to all that. If you have the N95, N100, people will sometimes say that N95 is enough. If you can, by all means, get N99 or N100, or the ones that I was just saying before, the FFP3 for these collapsible respirators. That's you're just getting a bit more protection, and whenever you can, just go for it. So folks, next video on the topic of air is going to be covering the S10 Respirator used by the British Army. Guys, take care, have a great day, and see you on the next video.